Let's get back to Paris in the chill of October 1307. Word sweeps the streets. Agents of King Philip IV have arrested scores of men who once wore white mantles marked with a red cross, the Knights Templar. Accused of heresy, blasphemy, and secret vices, these warrior monks are thrust from fortress and commandery into prisons and interrogations. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, will be burned in 1314 after a tortured, politicized trial. That public and brutal end seeds a story that will outlive the order itself. That Molay cursed the king and pope from the flames, damnations later repeated in rumor and legend. Sources: Malcolm Barber, The Trial of the Templars, the Chinon Parchment and Papal Records. To understand how this happened, go back to the order's birth. Around 1119, a small band of knights in Jerusalem, led by Hugues de Payon, bound themselves by vows to protect pilgrims and defend the holy places. Endorsed publicly at the Council of Troyes in 1129 and championed by Bernard of Clairvaux, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon combined monastic rule with military purpose. They built a network of houses, held castles in the Latin East, and became vital to the Crusader state's defense. Their white mantle and red cross came to symbolize both piety and martial authority. Sources: Jonathan Riley Smith, The First Crusaders, The Rule of the Templars, Bernard of Clairvaux's letters. As the 12th and 13th centuries progressed, the Templars' remit broadened. They guarded pilgrims and garrisoned fortresses, fought at key battles, and administered an international organization with revenues, estates, and an incipient banking system. Nobles placed valuables and funds in Templar custody for safekeeping and transfer. That mixture of military service and financial power made them indispensable and conspicuous. Sources: Giles Constable on Medieval Finance, Riley Smith, Helen Nicholson, The Knights Templar. The collapse of the Crusader states and the fall of Acre in 1291 left the Templars without their original raison d'etre. They retained vast property and privileges in Europe, which intensified envy and provoked suspicion. King Philip IV of France, heavily indebted and determined to consolidate power, moved against them in 1307, using arrests, coerced confessions under torture, and public spectacle. Philip engineered the order's downfall. Pope Clement V, pressed by the crown and political realities, ultimately suppressed the order at the Council of Vienne in 1312. Much Templar property was seized or redistributed. Jacques de Molay's execution in 1314 became the stark culmination of the affair. Sources: Barber, The Trial of the Templars, Primary Papal Bulls, Contemporary Chronicles. From the moment of their suppression, fact and rumor entwined. Confessions obtained under torture, secretive rites exaggerated by enemies, and the sudden disappearance of a wealthy, autonomous institution helped create fertile ground for myths. One enduring legend held that Molay on the pyre denounced Pope and King and foretold swift divine retribution, a curse often repeated in later retellings. Over centuries, this narrative was retold in chronicles, pamphlets, and popular histories, becoming part of France's cultural memory. Sources: Barber, Helen Nicholson, Barber Frail on myth-making and later Templar lore. Fast forward to the late 18th century. During the French Revolution, when crowds toppled symbols of royal and ecclesiastical authority, the figure of Jacques de Molay surfaced again in popular imagination. Contemporary and later commentators record that revolutionary fervor sometimes invoked older grievances and legendary justice. In certain pamphlets, songs, and anecdotes circulating in revolutionary Paris, revolutionaries and royalists alike referenced Molay's curse and even shouted for the revenge of Jacques de Molay as a folkloric emblem of vengeance against kings and priests. These shouts were less an organized Templar revival than evidence that Molay's story had become a potent political metaphor, a way for people to frame the moment as divine retribution or historical reckoning. Historians caution that many such reports are themselves shaped by later mythologizing and by factional propaganda. Sources: Malcolm Barber on post-1314 tradition, Studies of Revolutionary Political Culture and Popular Pamphleteering, Secondary Analyses of the Templar Legend in Modern France by Helen Nicholson and others. Today, historians evaluate the Templars by separating documented fact from later fiction. The order's primary identity was as a religious military organization, influential in warfare, administration, and medieval finance. Their destruction owed as much to political calculation and financial motives as to any genuine, provable heresy. The transformation of Jacques de Molay into an avenging symbol, invoked centuries later during upheavals like the French Revolution, shows how historical memory can be reworked into political language. The real legacy of the Templars lies both in the archives and castles they left behind and in the long afterlife of stories that turned a medieval grandmaster into a figure of myth and grievance. Sources: Jonathan Riley Smith, Malcolm Barber, Helen Nicholson. Primary documents including the Chinon parchment and papal bulls. Selected sources: Malcolm Barber, The Trial of the Templars, Jonathan Riley Smith, The First Crusaders and the Knights of Christ, Helen Nicholson, The Knights Templar, A New History, Barber Frail, Writings on Templar Documents and Myth-Making. Primary sources: The Rule of the Templars, Papal Bulls Relating to Suppression, The Chinon Parchment, Vatican Archives. Studies of Revolutionary Popular Culture and Pamphleteering for the Reception of Molay's Legend,